How to paint in watercolors. Today I have 7 unpopular opinions for you. Welcome back to my channel. If we have not met before, my name is Michelle, and on this channel you will find videos on watercolor painting, drawing, mixed media, even some business and motivational videos like this one. Please do consider subscribing. If you click the little bell icon, you can get notified every time I have a new video for you. I make at least one free video a week here on YouTube on a Thursday with extra content for Patreon subscribers. So the first thing to say about today's video is it's just a talking video, so feel free just to listen to it like a podcast if you're working or doing housework or something like that. Please don't leave me a load of comments that say, shut up, stop talking, or put some pictures in, because I'm telling you right now, this is just a video of me talking, and we're going to talk about some unpopular watercolor opinions that I have. Now, to clarify, these are just my opinions, and everybody is entitled to an opinion, and I'm entitled to put my opinions on my watercolor channel, but this does not mean that you have to agree with them or get angry about them if you don't agree with them. Doesn't mean that I'm saying that I'm right and you're wrong. So it's just a bit of fun. I thought I'd go through a few things that I generally have a different opinion to the mainstream on. And you can let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with these. But as I said, keep it friendly, just light-hearted, just a bit of fun. So the first thing I'm going to say to you is that you cannot just copy Daniel Smith or any other brand of paints just by copying the pigment numbers. So I see this so often in Facebook groups and watercolor forums. People saying, I'd love this particular tube of paint, but I can't afford it. And someone else says, that's okay, just you can read on the back the pigment numbers, just get those 2 pigment numbers, mix it together and you've got that paint. Well, I'm here to tell you, no, you haven't. There is far more to the manufacture of paints, and I do know something about this because I have worked with 2 separate manufacturers designing paint colours. There is far more to the manufacture of paints than just mixing the same pigment numbers together. And that is even assuming that a pigment number is always the same in the way that the colour looks, because it absolutely isn't. You get a wide range of shades and tones within each pigment. The preparation of the pigment makes a difference because colour is light reflected from a surface. The size that you grind the pigments to makes a difference to how the colour looks, and that's without talking about binders. Now, in simple terms, watercolour is a simple thing. It's just pigment and binders, but the binders that are used vary hugely from manufacturer to manufacturer, and there is a very fine art in getting this right and getting the balance right for each individual pigment, and especially with mixed pigments. So if you think that you're going to grab 2 pigment numbers, mix them together, and you've got the exact same colour as a popular manufacturer's paint, and just to clarify, I have no affiliation with Daniel Smith paints and they don't make my paints. It's just that this is the brand that I see people doing this most often with. If you think you're going to grab the same 2 pigment numbers and mix the same paint, you are not. That's not to say it's not fun to have a go at this. You know, I'm not saying that you should never do this. And of course you can get some kind of approximation. How accurate it will be, you know, is dependent on all sorts of things. But please don't imagine that paints are so simple that you can just get the same pigment numbers and mix the same colour. At this point, if you're enjoying this video, could I ask you for a quick favour? Could you please click the like button, click the thumbs up. If you like, comment, share or subscribe, it really helps my YouTube channel. A huge amount of people who watch me on YouTube aren't subscribed. If you can click that subscribe button, again, it really helps my YouTube channel. I'm very, very grateful to all of you who watch me here on YouTube. Next up, if you've watched me on this channel for a long time, you will know this already. There is no substitute for stretching your paper, and I always advocate for paper stretching. Now, there's nothing that causes more trouble, there's nothing that causes comments to kick off more than this discussion about paper stretching, because there are 2 firm camps: people that believe you should always stretch your paper and people that believe it's a total waste of time, or simply that it's just a lot of trouble and not worth the bother. So I am firmly in team paper stretching. I was taught to do it from my very first painting. I've always done it, and I do advocate that it's the best surface possible. It's not just for aesthetics when your paper is dry. It actually affects how you paint on the surface. Of course, there are some alternatives, and blocks are one alternative, but that's not really an option if you like to paint very large like me, because the blocks don't always come up big enough. There are numerous reasons why paper stretching is a good idea, including economy, I won't bang on about it too much here. But what I do want to say to you is that if you've read a load of stuff about paper stretching being difficult and time consuming and fiddly, it's one of these things. It's a bit like submitting your tax return. You know, we all have this idea in our head that it's way more difficult than it actually is. It's one of these things that just builds up psychologically, and you just get to the point where you think, oh God, it's just such a hassle. But the truth is, paper stretching, if you're taught a good method, is really quick and really easy. So again, it's just my opinion. I'm not going to make you stretch your paper. I have students, real life students of mine, who've been coming to me for 10 years who still refuse to stretch their paper. I just let it go. It's not going to bother me if you don't stretch your paper. However, if you would like to have a go at it, I've got a really simple method for you. You'll find a video tutorial in the description of this video. My next unpopular opinion is that you don't need Archie's watercolour paper, you don't need Daniel Smith paint, and you don't need pure sable brushes. They're cruel to animals anyway. You don't need the absolute best top of the range to get started or even to be an artist. I don't ever use Archie's watercolour paper, and yet if you read some Facebook forums you will think that nothing else could be used. You know, you get people come on to complete beginners and say you must buy Archie's watercolour paper. Well, it's very good paper, but it's also incredibly expensive. Yes, if you get paper or paintbrushes that are so cheap as to be unusable, it's going to affect your painting. But I don't believe that you need top of the range to get started. I come from a background of actually being asked to demonstrate for manufacturers and to demonstrate in art shops and for art clubs, and sometimes I was asked to use a specific brand of paint. And often I've been asked to use specific brands of paper, and sometimes these are only practice papers. I can get a good painting. I would take this challenge any day of the week. I can get an absolutely fine painting on Bockingford paper if it's stretched. Yes, there is a point below which the quality of the materials will start affecting, and yes, things like Archie's and Daniel Smith are very good brands, and if you can afford them and if you're happy using them, go right ahead. But if you're a complete beginner, I don't want you to be disheartened if you can't afford those things, because it's absolute nonsense that you can't use a good brand, a good range of perhaps student quality materials and still get a good result. Just get started, just paint, just practice. All practice is worthwhile. Upgrade your materials as and when you can. And I don't ever recommend anybody uses Kolinsky sable brushes because they support the fur trade. They are not a byproduct of the meat industry or the fur industry, whatever you may have heard, that's just propaganda. Nobody needs a pure sable brush. I don't even like the feel of them. My next unpopular opinion is that you should stop randomly splattering your paintings, especially just after they're finished. I've seen it so often. People say, well, I've done this painting. Shall I splatter it? Shall I chuck a load of paint on top of it? And, I absolutely despair. Now, splattering is a perfectly reasonable technique. I actually teach it myself. I'm just in the process of finishing my watercolour textures online course, and I'll link to that one in the video description as well. If you're watching this video when it's just come out, I do have a pre-sale offer on that course. So splattering is a perfectly good technique, as is salt, because these things come and go in fashion. It used to be salt that people chucked on everything. Now it's splattering that people chuck on everything. And I'm here to tell you that texture techniques should be used purposefully. Of course, you can use them in some kind of abstract background, but if you're just using them because you think that they look interesting and you're just chucking them randomly on your work, it's never going to have a very good effect. And the whole splattering thing has been done to death. Now, it can look very beautiful, and if it's a part of your natural style, that's fine. But if you're just splattering everything you do because you've seen it on Instagram and you think it looks good, I advise you just to stop. Splattering is a great texture technique. I use it all the time for things like beaches. It can be really useful. Also things like pollen on flowers. But I don't ever make a nice painting and then just randomly get my paintbrush and chuck a load of splatters on top. In my opinion, it's complete madness. So my next unpopular opinion is that opaque pigments are not the cause of muddy paintings. And again, this is something that I see often asked by beginners, what's causing my paintings to look muddy and murky? And people will say, oh, it's opaque pigments. You just need to buy transparent pigments, all your problems are solved. Well, I'm here to tell you that whilst opaque pigments, certainly they can contribute to some of the causes of muddy painting. They are not the only cause. They're not even the main cause. I would say the main cause of muddy paintings is lack of tonal contrast. The second top cause would be a lack of understanding of how to mix colours. There is nothing wrong with opaque pigments. They can look very beautiful if you use them properly. Now, I've already made a video about the things that I think cause muddy paintings. I'll link to that video again in the description of this one if you want to explore that subject in more depth. But if you think that changing from opaque pigments to more transparent pigments is going to rescue all of your paintings and there will no longer be any mud on the horizon, I'm afraid you may be mistaken. Opaque pigments alone are not the main cause of muddy paintings. So my next unpopular opinion comes with a bit of a caveat. So my next unpopular opinion is that it's fine to use white paint within watercolours. And the caveat to that is if you are not a beginner. So you may have seen I've made a video and it's a very controversial video, gets a lot of views, and it's 3 colours that you should not use if you're a beginner. And one of those is white. And yes, I know white isn't technically a colour. Please don't kick off in the comments. So I do believe that you shouldn't use white paint if you're a complete beginner, and the reason for that is that watercolour is mostly a transparent medium and you need to learn how to use it transparently in order to fully understand the medium. However, once you have a good knowledge of the medium and the techniques and you're getting quite good at watercolour painting, you can introduce white where you need it. Now, there are some places that I don't suggest you use white. I'm not a fan of a finished painting having a load of white highlights stuck on it. It looks a bit like some kind of Tippex fluid or whiteout fluid that they used to use for correcting typewriting. However, white paint can be very useful in watercolour painting. I've done a video all about the best way to use white within watercolour paintings. I'll link to that one again in the description of this video. People that claim that using watercolours must be always transparent and this is the traditional way of using watercolours, the proper way of using watercolours, they obviously haven't studied art history, because the earliest watercolourists actually used white and used body colour. As I said at the beginning of this section, if you're a complete beginner, I would like you to stay away from white. It won't help you learn how to use watercolours. But once you've got to grips with the medium a little bit, feel free to use some white paint. Again, check out that video I made for you. It's going to show you some really, really good ways, some really subtle ways of using white paint that won't overwhelm your watercolour or make it muddy. That will just add to the finished effects. So for my next unpopular opinion, happy accidents are not necessarily a good idea. So there's something that you hear all the time with people that are starting to learn watercolour painting. Oh, go with the happy accidents. Things just happen. Sometimes you get these accidents and they're wonderful and things happen. Well, that's all very well, but to me it smacks of a lack of control of the paint. And I'm not talking about the need to control paint in order to paint very tightly or very detailed. In fact, loose painters need to control the paint even more. Now, in my opinion, some people that talk about happy accidents a lot of the time simply don't have any control over the medium. Now, nothing is completely controllable. Even if you're a top racing car driver, you don't have complete control of the car, the track, the weather conditions, every minute of every day. If you did, there would never be any car crashes in professional car racing. So you can't control everything 100%, and sometimes things do happen that make your painting look a little bit nicer and you weren't expecting them. And that's fine. But don't go too far along this path of always wanting happy accidents. As far as I'm concerned, I don't want any accidents in my watercolour painting. I want to be able to control the results, whether that's loose, whether that's tight. I need to be able to control what's happening. And once you become proficient at watercolour painting, you should be able to control what's going to happen maybe 90–95% of the time. So don't listen too much to this talk about happy accidents. Sometimes it's just an excuse for not learning to paint properly and not learning proper techniques. So do let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with anything I've said today. Quite happy for you to disagree as long as you're polite about it. Also, let me know if you have any unpopular watercolour opinions yourself. If you do find you need a little bit more help than I can give you here on YouTube with understanding watercolour techniques and gaining control over the paint so you don't have too many happy accidents or any kind of accidents with your painting, do take a look in the video description. You'll find all about my courses there. I've also got some free downloadable PDFs that you can grab for no money whatsoever that will help you to progress with your artwork. And if you need a bit more help with your drawing skills, not only will I have a course for you coming up later on this year, but I've also got a fantastic free video that you can watch right now all about the main mistakes I see people make with drawing. You can watch that video right now.